Have you ever thought about what it would be like if people were allowed to park in front of fire hydrants? Think of all the places in your life this would open up a few more parking spaces. The mall, the grocery store, the school, maybe even in your neighborhood. One more space right up close, where the action is. On the downside, fire crews would need to move the vehicles that were parked inconveniently for their purposes, and they wouldn't have time to be gentle about it. Parking in front of a hydrant would be taking your car's life into your hands. How often does that happen, though? On a per hydrant scale, it would probably average less than one problem per decade. I know of hydrants that haven't been accessed other than routine maintenance for my entire working memory of more than 30 years. So why are we restricting parking around them? In some situations it gets even worse. At my son's school, when I'm dropping him off in the morning or picking him up in the afternoon, there's a hydrant right near the doorway he comes out. If I park there, I have every intention of getting my car out of the way if I see a fire truck coming. I'm almost never out of my car for more than 6 minutes. So why is it such a big deal and worthy of a fine if I park there while I wait for my son? Well, for one thing, my battery could go out. I could drop off my son, jump back in my car, turn the key, and hear the distinctive clicking that indicates the battery just doesn't have enough juice to turn over the engine. If that happens, all my intentions about scurrying out of the way when I see a fire truck don't really mean anything. That's the biggest reason we have these rules. No one plans on their battery running out. No one wants to be blocking the way when the fire truck could be coming. But it happens anyway. The funny thing is, if we didn't have a rule about it, then we wouldn't ever think about it. It's so rare that a building actually catches on fire that we would all just park there and be really upset when the fire crew smashed our car or when our building burned down because the fire crew was smashing someone's car. That's one of the things that rules like this are supposed to do for us. Leaving to one side how good at it we are and aren't. We have one central planning committee that sees what kind of problems have been or could be, and then make rules to stay out of those problems. There are periodically fires at buildings, and so we have hydrants installed and set up parameters pertaining to the parking parallel to these particular plumbing pieces. We don't have to look too hard to find instances where this has gone off the rails, but in general this seems to work out for us. Putting the responsibility on every person to think of everything that could possibly go wrong and in particular every worst-case scenario doesn't work out. This does lead to a conundrum though. As long as there are rules, we will need rule breakers. That's why heaven needs to be a place without rules. It needs to be filled with people that follow the rules. It needs to be led by people who make fair and reasonable expectations and understand when exceptions are important. But here's the thing. There will be some sort of analog in heaven for the fire hydrant that needs to keep the parking clear. Except there, it won't be a rule. There won't be a ticket for parking there. But if you're the kind of person that will park there knowing that it could lead to problems, you won't be allowed into heaven. Those that put their short-term gain above the community's long-term good are not the kind of people that God is looking for. We can see this in a lot of ways. My favorite example is the parable of the sheep and goats in Matthew 25 verses 31 to 46. Those people that go out of their way to help the vulnerable are elevated. But there are other ways too. When you recognize this concern, you see it in the story of Ananias and Sapphira in Acts 5 verses 1 to 11, and the man stoned for gathering sticks on the Sabbath in Numbers 15:32-36. These are people who tried to join God's congregation with the goal of personal gain, then tried to push the rules just to get ahead of those in the church. It makes sense of Jesus criticizing the Pharisees for failing to uphold the more important laws while requiring others to keep the minutiae of the laws in Matthew 23 verse 4. Knowing the reason for a rule is important to deciding which rules can be suspended and when. And parking in front of a fire hydrant just to be a few steps closer to the door isn't a good reason to suspend that rule. What about you? What are some of those little rules that you are still willing to break just to gain a short-term benefit? Upon reflection, do you see it as selfish? Are you going to work to improve on that? Thank you for watching my video. If you like theological and philosophical insights and deep dives into tough theological questions, rather than just the normal fluff that you will get from an apologetic channel or a normal Sunday sermon, then consider subscribing and hitting the bell. Also, if you like what you've heard here and want more, links to my blog, Amazon author page, and Zazzle products page are in the description.